Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakio. Thanks for joining me for Dharma Sunday. We take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them in with real-world events. The title of today's discussion is Contentment in Pixar's new movie, Soul. Before we get into that, I'd like to remind you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. These teachings are offered free of charge, but if you'd like to make a contribution, information for that is in the description. If you want to do a deep dive into Buddhist training, check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. It's available everywhere books are sold, and there's a link to a sample chapter also in the description for this talk. Now, I'm a big fan of Pixar movies, and I'll warn you, this talk will contain some spoilers, but I'll try to keep those to a minimum in order to get my point across. And they recently came out with a movie called Soul, which was really chock full of Buddhist teachings. So I'd be very interested if any of you know if the writer or the director have any connections to Buddhism or if they practice Buddhism themselves, because there were just too many connections and coincidences between the movie and the sutras for me to think it was all accidental. But I'll give you a quick rundown of the movie and then we'll go into the lessons therein. So it starts with the teacher. His name is Joe. He's a jazz musician and he teaches music at a middle school. And he's living a good life. He has a nice apartment. He has a steady salary, but he's unhappy because his real love is jazz. He wants to play jazz for a living. And like most artists, writers, musicians, unfortunately, his passion doesn't pay the bills. So that's why he has to work and earn a living as a teacher. Eventually, he gets his big break. A woman named Dorothea comes to New York and she needs a piano player. So he gets the call and he's on his way. He does the audition, he wows them, he gets the gig, and then he dies on his way home. So the crux of the movie is Joe trying to get back to Earth, get back into his body so that he can do his gig. Now, while he's in what I would call not heaven, it's more of a, I don't know what you would call it, but it's an in-between space between Earth and what they call the Great Beyond. He meets a living being called 22, and they go on all kinds of adventures. 22 is a new soul, meaning she hasn't been born yet because she hasn't found her spark. And she doesn't want to be born because she doesn't want to go to Earth. She thinks it's boring. She's scared. So it's her trying to gain the courage to go into Earth and get a body. And it's Joe trying to learn to deal with the fact that he's dead. Now, there's a quote in the movie that really struck me. And I was watching the movie with friends. I actually told them to stop and rewind so I could listen to it again. He's speaking with Dorothea, who's his idol. He's just done the audition. He's got the part, and he's disappointed because he thought he'd be very happy when he got this part, and he feels just like he did before. And Dorothea responds with a story. She says there's a fish swimming through the ocean. He swam up to an older fish and said, "I'm looking for this thing called the ocean. Do you know where it is?" The older fish looks at him and says, "You're in it right now." The younger fish says, "This isn't the ocean. This is just water." So that story obviously has all the makings of a Zen koan. And the lesson therein is that we're often looking for the things that we already have. And it's not a question of us finding them or attaining them. We just have to look through a slightly different lens in order to see them for what they are. And this is Joe's problem in the movie. He actually, again, has quite a nice life. He's able to do his passion, the thing he loves, on the side. He does jazz gigs regularly. He has a mother and friends who care about him. He has a steady job, a nice apartment in New York, which is obviously very expensive, but he can afford it, but he's not happy. And even when he gets the thing that he thought would make him happy, the gig with Dorothea and the option to be a full-time jazz musician, nothing changes. And the reason nothing changes is because our desires don't make us happy most of the time. In Buddhism, there's a word for this. It's called tanha, or unquenchable thirst. And we all have this thirst. We all, as human beings, want more and more and more. We get $50, we want $100. We get $100, we want $500. We get the gig with Dorothea, we want to play Carnegie Hall, right? So we're always struggling. We're never content. And this is why the second and third noble truth of Buddhism say suffering is caused by desire. The way to end suffering is to end desire. Now, I always remind students that this doesn't mean that desire is bad or that we're wrong for having desires, but it does mean that we have to investigate those desires, figure out which ones are good, which ones are harmful, and even the ones that are good, we have to learn to work with them skillfully. And this is Joe's problem in the movie. He has a desire to be a jazz musician, but because he's so focused on that desire, he can't appreciate what he already has. He can't appreciate the help he's giving to his students who want to also be jazz musicians. He can't appreciate the fact that he's a working musician in a city with lots of musicians who aren't working, that he has a home and a family. He doesn't see any of that because he's so caught up in his desire. So I say all of this to say that the lesson of soul and the lesson of Buddhism, one of the many lessons, is that desire isn't what we need. Contentment is what we need. And to put this another way, there's a Buddhist story about a monk who's practicing in the temple, and there's too many distractions there, so he's unhappy. So he goes off to a field to practice by himself, but there's crickets and birds singing, and he's still distracted and he's unhappy. So then he goes off into a cave, and there's no living things in the cave. So he thinks, finally, here I can do real Buddhist practice. And what happens? There's water dripping in the cave, and now he's distracted again. And then he realizes that he doesn't need to change his location in order to meditate. He needs to change his mind. He needs to learn to be content with the things he already has. And this is the lesson that Joe learns in Soul. He goes through lots of different adventures, and he comes to Earth, and he goes back, and he's in the body of a cat for a little while, which is quite funny. But at the end, he learns that the real goal is contentment. And they leave the movie open-ended. So we don't know if he goes back to being a teacher or if he's a full-time musician. It's just one of those things. We don't know. But I can tell from the look of his face, on his face, that he's seen the world differently than he saw it before. There's a scene with 22 where she has a similar experience, where a seed falls into her hand, and she's just flabbergasted by it. Because remember, she's never lived on Earth before. And she eats pizza, and she just thinks it's the most amazing thing because she's never eaten food before, right? And these normal, everyday occurrences that Joe completely takes for granted, to 22 are the things that make her want to live, finally. And then eventually Joe learns that these are the things that he should be living for, not his desires, not his dreams, not that it's wrong with having dreams, but he needs to focus on, appreciate, and be content with the things he already has. And this is important because in Buddhism, we often make that mistake of, well, money didn't make me happy, cars didn't make me happy, Buddhism and enlightenment, that will make me happy. And that's not true. Buddhism will make you a lot of things, but if you're practicing this because you think you'll gain a teaching or attain an empowerment and suddenly you'll be on cloud nine, well, maybe for a few moments, but just like Joe, you'll quickly end up feeling just like you did before. Because the goal of Buddhism isn't to make us feel happy per se, though happiness is good and you do experience happiness as the practice, as part of the practice. The goal of Buddhism is to help us experience contentment, to help us be happy with the things we already have, to remind us that, it's not a normal thing to have a warm, dry place to sleep. So if we have that, well, let's be content with that. It's not a normal thing to have loving family and friends. A lot of people don't have that. So if we do, again, that's something we can be content about. There are countless passages in the sutras where the monks and the nuns and the laymen and the laywomen are ecstatic just because they were able to practice the Dharma, because it's so rare to have access to these teachings. Many people don't. And here we are, we can just sit in front of our laptops and get them whenever we want. We don't have to climb a mountain to seek out a guru. We don't have to leave our families and friends. We can just go to the library or order a book online or watch a YouTube live stream, and we can practice the Dharma. And that's an amazing thing. It's something we should be content with. So part of the practice is not some of our desires we eliminate, but a lot of the practice, at least for me, has been adjusting my desires. Going from, I want $1 million to, I want enough money to pay my bills. Going from, I want to be rich and famous to, I want to have a loving family and friends. Adjusting our desires, not eliminating them completely, but making them to a point where they're attainable, they're realistic, and instead of causing suffering for ourselves and others, they cause joy for ourselves and others. We see this again in Soul, where Joe doesn't give up his desire for music. He loves it just as much at the end as he did in the beginning, but he adjusts his desires. He wants to play just to play. He's not trying to be famous anymore. He doesn't want the big record deal. He just wants to be a musician, and he's a lot happier as a result. And as we gain that contentment through our practice, the next step is gratitude. And this is the other side of the first noble truth, which says life is suffering. Because life is suffering. There's a lot of suffering in the world, and we have to stand up and look that in the face. But when we realize how much suffering there is, then we can realize and appreciate the ways that we're not suffering. And then we're content with the things we have, not eliminating our desires again, but just adjusting them to something reasonable. And then once we adjust our desires, that then leads to gratitude. And we're grateful for the things we have. And our practice, instead of becoming something we do to attain something, to fix ourselves, our practice is something we do to express our gratitude, to say thank you. I don't meditate because I want to attain enlightenment. I meditate as a thank you, as an expression of my gratitude for these teachings. I don't chant because I'm hoping I'll be granted magic powers or that I'll be reborn in, some far off land. I chant as a thank you, that I have the ability to chant, that I have access to these teachings, that they're so available to me. And then that gratitude extends to other parts of our lives. We wash the dishes because we're grateful for the meal we just ate. We vacuum the living room and make the bed because we're grateful we have a warm, dry place to sleep. Again, gratitude, not desire, feeds our practice, feeds our actions. And then, just like Joe at the end of the movie, we see the same world we saw before, but we see it with different eyes. We appreciate it more. And we have contentment and gratitude as a result. Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. This is my first time using a movie as part of a Dharma talk, but I think it went well. If there are other current events or things you think you've seen Buddhist teachings in that you'd like me to talk about, please email me at sameoldzen@gmail.com or type it up in the chat. I'll be happy to discuss it during a future talk, future Dharma Sunday. But now we're moving into the Q&A, where you can ask me questions about this evening's talk or about Buddhism in general. Also, if you just have comments you'd like to share, whether you liked the movie, disliked it, or just something about life in general, leave it in the comments and I'll certainly respond. While we're waiting for those to come in, I have a few announcements. So this is Dharma Sunday. We meet every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do that through a YouTube live stream. Just like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to take part in the live stream. We also do meditation and sutra study every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's also live streamed at the channel. Okay, let's see. Our first comment is from Divad Buddha X. He did the bow emoji. Thank you, Divad. Good to see you. He also said, though contentment is important, I think it's equally important to challenge yourself and explore new things rather than staying in the comfort zone. This is absolutely true. I agree 100%. And this is a challenging practice, but it's an important one because we can also go to the opposite side where we're so not wanting to desire things that we're not trying to do anything to improve our lives. And that can be equally bad as well, right? So we're going from hedonism all the way to asceticism. And Buddha made that mistake, right? Where he stopped eating, he stopped bathing, and he didn't learn anything new. He just almost died as a result. So this is the middle path, right? That middle path between desire and asceticism is contentment. I like the things I have, I appreciate them, but I'm also working to see, well, maybe there are other things I can do to improve my life, make it better, right? And this is why Buddhism is very much a process-oriented thing, because we're not trying to attain something new, we're just going about the practice. And this is confusing to Westerners. Like, why are we doing this bowing, this chanting work, this meditation? And traditionally, it's not explained to you. The idea is over time, the practice will work on you and you'll understand, oh, we chant because it's an expression of gratitude. We meditate because it teaches us equanimity. But it's not the teacher telling you that. It's you gaining those things yourself. And that's how you learn. But, in the West, we like to know what's going on before we do it. So there's a lot more talking. We explain the practice and then we go about it. And yeah, that's an excellent summation of the middle way. That, we're not hedonists, but we're not ascetics either. We're content with what we have, but we're still doing what we need to do to make things better. I often think of gardening. So you plant seeds and you have no idea what's going to grow and what's not going to grow. But you water them, you give them sunlight, you fertilize them, you go through the process, and then you just have faith that something will come of it. And I think that's what you're getting at, Divad, is that it's not something where we stop trying altogether. We go about the process. We plant those roots of good virtue that the Buddha talks about. And then as we do that, things happen on their own, but we're not striving, we're not straining, we're just doing the right thing over and over and over again. So yeah, excellent comment, good insight. Frank Ingiosi says, thank you, Sensei. I really enjoyed the talk tonight and connecting it to the film. And he also did the bow emoji. Oh, thank you, Frank. I highly recommend the film. It's really cool. There were a lot of things. It's so funny. I was watching the movie, and at a certain point, I took out my phone and I started texting myself different things. And, I could really go really deep into it. But I think the teaching of contentment was the core that came from soul. So, the sutras tell us that we can learn the Dharma from anything and everything. So I was glad I was able to find some of it in a Pixar film. And I'm glad it helped you, Frank. Frank also says, attainment is something I get caught on in my practice. I struggle at times to break the doing and getting approach. Well, that's completely understandable, and that's completely cultural. I don't know where you're located, but I'm in the United States, and in the West, it's all about doing, getting, more. And this goes all the way back to grade school, if you think about it. You don't learn just to learn. You learn to pass a test. And you pass the test to get grades. And you get the grades because why? Because you want a good class rank, because you want a good GPA. And then once you have that GPA, You're not learning just to learn. You're learning so you can get to college, and you go to college so you can get the degree, so you can get the job. And what Buddhism teaches is the opposite. We get away from that getting and that attaining, and we do things just to do them, right? This is why it's so important, why we always talk so much about living in the moment, right? Not that the future is bad or the past is bad. It's just we have to learn to do things just to do them, right? Frank, or Joe rather, in the movie had to learn to be a musician just to be a musician, right? He had to learn how to be a school teacher just to be a school teacher without this idea of I'm not attaining what I need to attain. Washing dishes, mowing the lawn. This is why there's such a focus on manual labor if you ever go to a Buddhist temple, because it's really hard to make, shoveling horse manure like I used to do at the Indianapolis Zen Center for the garden, to fertilize it. It's really hard to turn that into something cool and sexy, right? If you're shoveling manure, you're just shoveling manure. If you're sweeping the floor, you're just sweeping the floor. You can't really build a lot of fantasies around that. And once you learn to do those things just to do them, it's like this huge weight just comes off of your shoulders. Like I remember when my teachers finally got through to me that we're not here to attain enlightenment. We practice just to practice. And my practice became so much more enjoyable because I wasn't thinking, is this the right posture to gain enlightenment? My leg hurts. Does that mean I'm not doing it right? No, I'm just meditating just to meditate. I'm chanting just to chant. I'm going to the temple just to go to the temple. And it's so invigorating to do that. It makes things so much easier. And it's the same with everyday life. When we can learn to live just to live and get away from all that getting that we're taught in the West, everything just becomes a lot easier. I remember I read a book several years ago. It was called, I think, Green with Envy. And it's about this idea of the myth of the American dream and how everyone thinks that their neighbor has it better than they do. But if you look under the curtains, that, they bought that big house because they got a gift from their parents and their parents are paying for it, or the only reason they got that fancy vacation is because they're financing it with credit cards. So we're all trying to chase after this dream that none of us are actually attaining, right? We're just trying to more, because that's what the media tells us to do. But if we can learn to be content with what we have, it's so liberating as a result. And what practices like meditation does is it strips us away of that getting, because you can't get anything when you're sitting on the cushion. You come there with all those fantasies, but after the 5,000th time you've sat down and, the sky hasn't cracked open and angels haven't talked to you, you either stop sitting or you sit just to sit. It forces you to learn contentment. So I say all that to say you're not alone, Frank. That's a struggle that we all have. But I promise you keep doing these practices, the chanting, the meditation, the bowing, you'll slowly get away from that. It worked for me, worked for Buddha, it'll work for you as well. Allison Griffin says, it is a cool movie. Thanks. Yeah, it was great. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Pixar. I was a Disney kid growing up. I grew up in an evangelical Christian home, so we were only allowed to watch Disney movies. So I can still remember most of the songs to, Lady and the Tramp and The Lion King and all that. So I guess Pixar is my adult version of Disney movies. It's pretty cool. And I thought Soul was great. Very well done. Divad Buddha X says, I think the Matrix movies have a lot of layers and meanings. Yes, they have too many layers and meanings. In fact, I've tried so many times to write a blog post at my blog, The Same Old Zen, or to do a talk like this one on the Matrix movies, but there's just so much there that picking one thing that I want to talk about is just challenging. It was the same thing with Soul. I struggled to pick just one thing to talk about, so we wouldn't be here for 4 hours. But yeah, there's a lot of Buddhist teachings in the Matrix, absolutely. I do think I want to talk about that eventually. A lot of people, I think, miss the point and the meaning of the third movie. And I think I will. I will just suck it up and talk about the Matrix at some point. It'll just be hard to trim it down to just a few lessons because, like I said, the 3 movies are just so deep and there's just so much there. But you pushed me over the edge, Divad. I think I'm going to go over that at some point in the future. Thank you. Allison Griffin, it is hard to rid oneself of this Western mindset. I passed tests and then forgot what I crammed. What a waste of education. I did the exact same thing. And it's so funny, like I said, that get, me, attain mindset. It's all about passing the test. You don't care about learning anything. And you just get the certification so you can get the job. You get the jobs, you can get the next job. And you don't really learn or appreciate anything. It's only been later in my life that I've been able to sort of let go of that, mostly through my practice and just, I'm going to read a book just to read a book. I'm not going to be graded on this. There's no certification I can get. I just want to do it because I enjoy it. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. So I'm 100% with you on that. And I owe you all a deep apology. I forgot to plug in my power cord and my laptop is about to die. Give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back. I promise. I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, actually. All right, back in business. Thank you so much for your patience. But yeah, like I was saying, but it's very liberating to be able to let go of that mindset because that gets us away from the idea of perfectionism. That is such a big part of Western culture. What just happened is actually a good example of that. So if you're just tuning in, I did not plug in my power cord when I started the live stream today. And I was getting a warning that my laptop was about to die. So I had to jump up, get the power cord, plug it in. Not a huge deal, but a bit embarrassing. And me being a recovering perfectionist, I'm a little like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But, thanks to Buddhism, I understand that mistakes happen and I'm able to just allow myself to be imperfect, to do silly things sometimes like that. And I think this attainment mindset that we have of get, want, puts so much pressure on us to be perfect, to not make mistakes. And then we carry that into our practice. We carry that into our education. I don't want to meditate just to meditate. I want the new belt. Like in karate, you have blue belts and green belts and purple belts. And we don't do that in Buddhism. Everyone's the same. We all wear the same robes. But that's something that needs to be learned. So yeah, great insight, Allison. Allison Griffin also says, right, let go of enlightenment. I've given that up for like 2 million more rebirths. That's a great way to put it. And actually what you just said reminds me of a story. It's not a Buddhist story. I believe it's Hindu, actually. But there was a great guru who was very deeply realized, had very many attainments. And he went to his teacher and said, how many rebirths will it require for me to realize enlightenment? And his teacher pointed to a very tall, very large tree with lots of leaves on it and said, as many lifetimes as are on that tree. And the student rejoiced and said, oh, wow, so few. And I did not understand that when I first heard that story. It's like, why is he happy that he has to do like 1 million rebirths in order to realize enlightenment? But now I get it. That it's not the enlightenment that's the important thing. It's the process. I get to train. I get to practice. I get to do and see and experience new things. In the movie, Joe had to learn to play music just to play music. We have to learn to practice Buddhism just to practice Buddhism. And then we learn how to feed the cat, how to wash the dishes, how to go to work, just to do those things. Completely opposite of what we learn in the West, but so empowering when we finally gain that lesson. Good insight, Allison. Thanks for sharing. Divad Buddha X says, Avatar The Last Airbender has an amazing episode where Aang opens up the 7 chakras by meditating. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yes, I am extremely familiar with Avatar The Last Airbender. And I'm a big fan. We will not speak of the movie created by M. Night Shyamalan. It does not exist in this universe. But I'm a big fan of the cartoons by Nickelodeon. I heard that they're about to create more. Like they create a whole studio so they can make more Avatar cartoons and films. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, Aang and his adventures, Korra and her adventures, they learn a lot of Zen and Buddhist and Taoist influenced teachings. That'd be another one I'd be interested to know exactly what's the background of the writers and the directors, because there's a little too much there for it to just be a coincidence. But yeah, Avatar The Last Airbender is great. I do remember the episode where he has to open his 7 chakras and he has trouble opening the crown chakra because he doesn't want to let go. Primarily, he doesn't want to let go of his friends, right? And it's very interesting because when he goes into the battle and he's fighting the Fire King and he doesn't want to kill him, but he needs to rescue everyone, it's his attachments to his friends that allows him to do it, but it's also his attachment to his morals and his ethics as well that allows him to be successful. Spoilers if you haven't seen the episode, but this practice forces us to be very creative, which is great. So many times we as Westerners, we think, okay, well, we'll put down our ethics for now, and then we'll pick them back up later. So you remember he got a lot of pressure from everyone to kill the Fire King, right? Because, I mean, the Fire King was legitimately evil. And he's like, no, airbenders don't do that. The Avatar doesn't do that. And he even talks to past avatars. And I think it was Kyoshi who said, no, you got to kill him. He's like, but I don't want to do that. And then because he held to his values and to his practice, he was able to find a creative solution to his problem, which was to take the Fire King's bending away from him. So he didn't kill him. He just made it so he couldn't hurt people anymore. And that's such a powerful lesson and something I've had to learn, that if I really hold myself to account, this is how I want to live my life. I'm going to keep the 5 precepts. I'm going to keep the 4 noble truths, the noble eightfold path. I'm going to practice the 6 perfections of the 4 Brahma Viharas. If we hold ourselves to that, we become very creative and we find new ways of doing things, right? So with our desires, going back to that, we don't get rid of all of our desires, but we find new and creative ways to fulfill them that are also in keeping with the teachings. And we're willing to let go of the desires that are not in keeping with the teachings. So that's what I got from that particular episode and the finale of Avatar: The Last Airbender, at least for the Aang saga. So yeah, lots of good lessons there as well. Allison Griffin said, yes, so much to learn and born without an owner's manual. Yes. Wouldn't life be so much easier if there was an owner's manual? I personally would like that. Though I will say over time, I've just accepted the sutras as the owner's manual. That's kind of my cheat code. It's just, you know what? What worked for Buddha 2,600 years ago? What worked for Dogen? What worked for Shinran? What worked for Honen, for Isai, for Shantideva? They seem to have it together for the most part. So what lessons can I learn? And this is why these teachings are so valuable and so important, because we don't have to recreate the wheel. We don't have to figure it out all on our own. Can you imagine if you had to come up with the Four Noble Truths by yourself? How terrible would that be? If we had to figure out the 6 perfections without any help or assistance. So yeah, for me personally, I think Buddhism and Buddhist teachings and Buddhist practices, the Lotus Sutra, which we're currently going over during meditation and sutra study, the Nirvana Sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, etc. These are owner's manuals, right? People who've come before, who've walked the path and said, you know what, this is what worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you as well. Joshua Bisaru said, helpful, thank you, and then the heart emoji. Thank you, Joshua. I'm glad this helps you. For those of you who've just tuning in, this is the Q&A portion of tonight's Dharma Sunday. We meet every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be notified when the live stream starts so you can participate. We also do meditation and sutra study every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also live streamed at this channel. That consists of a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a sutra. Again, now we're doing the Lotus Sutra, followed by a Dharma talk and a Q&A. Allison Griffin said, I guess that's what Buddhism has been for me, an owner's manual. Me too, just like I said, 100%. And I think that we struggle with that in the West a little bit because we're very independent. We're very, don't tell me what to do. And I struggle with that a lot. Like I said, I struggled a lot with, pride and selfishness early in my practice. So I had to recalibrate my thinking that, this isn't anyone trying to control me. They're not trying to make me do anything. I can leave the temple anytime I want. There's no lock on the door, but they are giving me helpful suggestions that can guide me along the path. And through a little bit of faith in the practice and the Buddha, but then also just, experiencing it for myself that, oh, I guess this does work. I learned to let go of that ego and just, like you said, allow Buddhism to be my owner's manual. And then Allison gave the bell emoji. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate that. So, any other questions or comments before we end for the evening? All right, well, it looks like that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, Sangha is such an important part of the practice, and it's beautiful we get to gather like this and talk with each other and share the teachings. So until next time, Amitabha. Oh, we have one more. Joshua Bissaro said, pride for me has just been misunderstood anxiety and fear and inability to relax. Yes, it's so funny. I talk to you guys and you make comments, and it's like we're in different bodies, but we have so many similar experiences. Because I realized that my anxiety and fear led to pridefulness. Pride was kind of a defense mechanism. I'd make up all these reasons why I was too good or too clever to do things. I don't know if you do this or not, but this is what I did. I'd make up all these reasons why I was too good or too clever to do things. In reality, I was just afraid. You know, I don't know if I'm good at bowling, so I'm going to make up an excuse that bowling is stupid and I don't want to do it. um, I don't feel comfortable bowing, so I'm going to make up some reason in my mind that I'm too prideful and too important to bow. And really, it was just fear. I was afraid that I was going to mess up. I'm thinking specifically about the Oryoki bowl practice that we do in Buddhist temples. It's slightly different everywhere, but traditionally, you'll have 4 bowls that you eat out, and the monks come and they put the food in different bowls, and it's a very ritualized way of eating, and it's very methodical. And you have to put the bowl in a certain spoon, or put the spoon in a certain bowl at a certain angle when you're done. Your chopsticks have to be just a certain way when you're done, and afterwards you take water and you pour it into the bowls and you clean them out, and then you drink some of the water, and then you pour the rest out as an offering to the hungry ghost. And the lesson of Oryoki bowl eating, at least for me, is that you're not going to get it right. It almost forces you to make mistakes, especially in the beginning, because there's no way you're going to put the chopsticks exactly right or bow at the exact right time. And even monastics who have been doing the practice for years, in some cases, make mistakes, right? In my book, Perfectly Ordinary, I actually write about the first time I did Oryoki bowl practice, where I was trying to pour out my hungry ghost offering, so the mixture of water and dirty, food waste that was in my bowl, and I had a back spasm from an injury, and I went like this with my left hand. I actually spilled a bunch of water on the person next to me. It was horrifying. And I was convinced they were going to kick me out. I always thought they were going to kick me out, but they didn't. Everyone just stood there, or sat there rather, without moving. The person I spilled water on, she got up without missing a beat, grabbed some paper towels, cleaned it up, went back, threw it away, sat down before I could say or do anything. Right? And that was just such an important lesson to me, that I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be prideful. I can make mistakes, and it's okay, as long as I clean up afterwards. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal, because we are so afraid and so anxious in the West, because we are punished so much if we make a mistake, if we say the wrong thing, if we do a wrong thing. And I think it's an important part of Buddhist practice that we know that we're allowed to make mistakes, that we're encouraged to make mistakes, in fact, because that's part of the learning. The Buddha wasn't perfect, and neither are we, and that's okay. But yeah, pride for me was all about fear and anxiety that I had. I don't want to do it because I don't think I'll be good at it, but really I'm going to make up some other excuse. So yeah, thank you for sharing, Joshua. And then you did the bow emoji. Allison Griffin says, LOL, knowing what pride is caused by generates compassion for self and others with practice, lots of practice. Yes, 100%. Because when we know where our own pride and fear and anxiety comes from, then we can witness it in others, and then we just don't take things so personally anymore. Yeah, great insight, Allison, 100%. We learn about ourselves, and that helps us learn about others. That's why Dogen said that to learn about the self is to forget about the self. And then he goes on at the end, it says, to forget about the self is to be enlightened by a myriad of things. Because we're all Buddha. And once we learn about our own Buddha nature, we understand the Buddha nature of everyone else. Once we learn about our own struggles and defilements, we learn about the struggles and defilements of everyone else. It's just part of the practice. Let's see. Joshua did a couple of emojis. I think that's a laughing emoji and a heart emoji. TY, thank you. And then you said, humble steps is scary, but the right way forward. Yes, absolutely. I like that a lot. 100%. Thank you for that teaching, Joshua. I appreciate it. Oh, wow. So, anything else for this evening before we close? All right. Well, thanks again. Thank you so much. I learned so much from our conversations. I appreciate all of your insights. Allison Griffin says Amitabha. Amitabha to all of you. Thank you. Until next time.